Hey guys, welcome back to the Art and Business of Writing podcast. I am your host, Chris Jones, where today I am joined by two powerful women, Courtney Buzzell and Shelley Smith. Courtney Buzzell is the owner of Proximo Marketing Strategies, a full-service marketing firm based in Yorktown, Virginia, which serves clients all across the country. Courtney is also adjunct professor at Thomas Nelson Community College, where she educates students on the best practices for marketing in the 21st century. Shelley is an author, executive coach, and impact leadership model. She's also the owner and operator of Premier Rapport Incorporated, as well as serving on the board of Catholic Charities. These two ladies are going to teach you today how to network. They're very, very powerful networks, not just online but offline, which is very important for authors. As we develop our books, we really have to get back into the phase of networking with real people. And these two ladies are going to tell you how they used their network not only to write and create stories in their book, but then to take their book and push it outward. Their networks have helped them to start roundtables and discussions based on their book that help to empower and strengthen women, which is their core target audience. So they're really going to talk about how to use the strength and power of your network to drive your book. So without further ado, I'm bringing you Courtney Buzzell and Shelley Smith to the show today. Enjoy the interview. Hey guys, welcome to the Art and Business of Writing podcast. Grateful to have you, Courtney and Shelley. Courtney, you first. Why don't you expand on your bio and tell us a little bit more about you?
Sure, absolutely. I actually was a criminal justice and pre-law student back in the college days and aspired to be a corporate attorney. And I veered off of that. I started working for a medical practice out of Williamsburg, Virginia. Took an administrative role that I thought would be a short stint and ended up there almost 5 years. I oversaw the marketing for the practice, and after about 4.5 years, I stepped out of that practice and launched with two business partners at the time, digital marketing firm Proximo Marketing Strategies. I've had that firm for almost 5 years. And it is pretty self-sufficient now at this point. I've got some amazing team players running operations on the day-to-day. I've recently launched a second business, Co-work Gloucester, VA, which is a co-working and small business incubator in Gloucester, Virginia. And then actually very recently I've taken a position with a medical practice, actually that one that I was with originally. I am overseeing acquisitions, so we are looking for dental practices throughout Tidewater with plans to venture out of state. I'm looking to find those, vet them, purchase them, and then develop those practices into fruitful ones like the one we have in Williamsburg.
Wow, you are a serial entrepreneur.
Busy.
Oh yes, it's amazing, and we'll have to figure out, down the line here in the questioning how you find time to write and sleep and eat and parent and all that other stuff you do.
And parent, right? That's the other job.
Right. Wow, Shelley, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. So my background, I grew up in a family-owned business that, of course, as a youngster, I didn't appreciate at the time. I started working when I was 11 back in Indiana, in my parents' auction house and flea market and restaurant. And I worked in the restaurant and grew up as a foodie, if you will. And again, didn't appreciate it at the time. I loved the money that I was earning and the freedom, but I didn't really understand the tutelage that I was getting in a family-owned business. My father was a very spirited entrepreneur, and he told me repeatedly, Shelley, you're never going to be happy working for somebody else. And of course, I didn't listen. So after I got out of school, I started working for a big mothership called Marriott International, and I got so much education and structure and tutelage to that. It's an incredible company. It still is an incredible company, but I didn't like being a number, if you will. So as much as I love the company, I really did have that entrepreneur calling from within, and I didn't even realize it. So I started working for them in Atlanta in the Courtyard division back in the early 80s. And that was when they were really growing and just new on the market. So I went through several different locations, opening them up. And then I jumped after 14 years and I went into the franchise world because I didn't want to move to DC. And I had started a family, and I went out to the local franchise partners that I had built relationships with and said, hey, you need to hire me, and here's my resume, and this is what I can do for you. And I was very fortunate that I got 3 job offers. I picked one of them and was with them for 8 years and grew them from 8 to 32 hotels. I left and went to another partner in Williamsburg thinking, gosh, hotels is all I know. And through that, got really burnt out in the brick and mortar and the hotel business. And I talked to a franchise partner, sort of figuring out what is it that I wanted to do. And I was going to open up a franchise called Daylight Donuts in the Hampton, Virginia area. And I literally woke up like a commercial and looked at my husband at 2 o'clock in the morning and said, baby, I don't want to get up and make the donuts. So I realized that it wasn't about the brick and the mortar. It was about the people. And the people that I had terminated over the years, and a colleague of mine coined the phrase released to the industry, and they would call me for advice. And I realized that it wasn't about the building and the physical building. It really was about the people, the development. And so long story short, about 10 years ago, I got into the business I'm in today of executive coaching and business consulting, and really around leadership development. So my expertise is around company cultures. It's the workplace environment and literally everything that goes with that. And I love it. I get to be with all kinds of different companies and people, and I work with individual entrepreneurs from the startup phase, and I'm very happy and pleased and honored to be one of the advisors in Courtney's co-working space here in Gloucester as well. But then I also work for the Fortune 500 companies and helping them with their culture and fine-tuning. So I get to have a tremendous amount of fun every day, and I've got 3 beautiful kids as well, and I write in my spare time like Courtney, and the 2 of us try to run as fast as we can and see who can get to the finish line. And neither one of us are at the finish line yet, which is kind of the fun, because we don't know where that finish is going to be.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's the beauty of it. I always tell people I never want to reach the destination.
Exactly.
I love the journey so much. Great. So you guys just put together a book, Brass Ovaries, and I'd love for you guys just to tell me how you came up with the concept of Brass Ovaries.
Sure. So this is Shelley. This is actually my second book, and I'm working on a third right now as well. But Courtney and I have been a part of an organization called the Peninsula Women's Network, which is one of the longest standing networks in our area for several years, both of us past presidents. And along the way, we met, maybe 6 years ago when I was doing an ebook recording for employee engagement. And one of the one-on-ones that I had with one of our circles of Power Group Women's, we were just in conversation. Her name is Linda Yardley. She's incredible. She owns Peacock Business Solutions here in our local area. And she was telling me her story and her journey. And all of a sudden she said, and I was told I had brass ovaries, and she kept talking, and I was like, wait, what? What did you just say? So I loved that, and I looked at her and I said, this was about 3 years ago. I said, gosh, Lindy, I've always wanted to write a book about women and their strengths, and we really do things differently. We look at things differently. We collaborate differently. We get educated differently. And can I please, use that? And she laughed and said, sure. And so as the story goes, I said, really got to put this book together. And I didn't want to do it alone this time. So I went out to a couple of people that I tremendously respect, and Courtney was obviously one of those. I loved her perspective as a millennial, as a very driven, focused, crazy, out of the box, millennial person, woman, strength, single mom with an incredible son. And I was like, wow, who better to collaborate than to get Courtney involved? So I pinged Courtney, and she jumped all over it. And so that's kind of the beginnings of it and how it went. And Courtney and I laugh because when we read the sections of the book, and as we were putting them together ourselves and gathering the stories, we would literally say to each other when we were having our own little pity parties for the day, as hey, we need to own our own brass. So that's a little bit from my perspective. But Courtney.
Sure. Well, that was pretty much it. Yes, she brought me in, and I'm passionate about empowering people in general. And I'm especially passionate about empowering women. I think that empowering them by educating them and sharing lessons that we as women are learning on a regular basis is how you set them free from fears, from chains that they've carried, from not feeling good enough, from not knowing how to get to the next level. So I was all about it, and I thought it was a great idea. I'm excited to be a part of it and honored.
Excellent. So tell me about the co-writing process. Let's break down the writing nuts and bolts. How was it to co-write? What did you do? What structure did you set up? Talk about it.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, because go ahead.
So lots of lessons learned from my first go-around. I was told, and little bits is actually in the book, I was told as my senior year by my English teacher how horrible I was at writing. And it has stood with me. She literally pulled me up in front of the class my senior year to tell everybody how not to write. And it has stuck with me this entire time that, I cannot articulate in writing and sometimes verbally as I'm stumbling over my words now. And so that's sort of already stuck with me. And through this process of thinking about who to collaborate with, we tried to think about how do we want to go at it. So the bottom line is, there was originally 3 of us in this process, and then ultimately Courtney and I. So we stood it up that Courtney came up with these amazing chapter titles that you have as well, and we'll read some of those if we've got time to sort of get the juices flowing. So from there, I would go in and do the core of the chapter, and then would start a story. So a little bit of the research behind it. We did several polls, by the way, on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And research from our own clients that we had. So that sort of was the pivotal binding of it. And then we would put our stories in, and then we would pass the chapter back over. So then Courtney would go in and add all of her information and her tweaks.
And my story, whatever story that I had personally gone through that applied to that, or my takeaway, so that it was different perspectives.
Exactly.
And then I'd send it back to Shelley to then add on to again until we got it to a place where we felt like this is it.
Exactly.
And then I think a big part of it was having an amazing editor.
Yes, our editor, Gail Kent, really kept us on point with you need something else here, or add another research point here. I mean, she was really incredible. And then we actually had previously put together a list of people that we wanted to make sure we got their perspectives on. And then we sent that out, if you will, to a focus group and said, here's some of the chapter titles. Which one do you think you want to read, give us feedback on, and possibly add some stories? And so from there, we sent it out to our list, and we just got an overflowing of feedback and interest and great stories. To be honest with you, we could have written 10 more books of just stories. Mm-hmm. And originally, we were going to have each chapter focus on an individual woman. But what we saw through the research and the conversations became just blatantly obvious to us that we all have the same fears and the same stumbles and the same bindings behind us, good, bad, ugly, different, whatever. And so that's when we realized that no, we really need to have common themes and then weave in what it is that we learned. So that's how the book finally came together.
Fun. No, that's great. I mean, you said a few really, really cool things. You talked about taking polls. You talked about client research, and then you talked about focus groups. I mean, 3 really impactful things to writing a good book. So with the polls, how'd you set those up?
So we would either just do a question and have it as an open forum, or we would list. So for example, on the fears, literally listed, I think at the time, maybe 18 or 20 things, and had people rank them. And I did it for men, women, age groups as well, so we could see if there was a difference in generations. And so there's actually some perspectives in the book around generations as well as the male-female point of view. And then from there, we said, here's the consistency of what we saw. And then we engaged a couple of PhDs to add additional layers to what it is that we found. So there's an emotional intelligence a portion in there from Dr. Sarah Spradlin, who is an emotional intelligence PhD and expert. So we would add layers to, why is it that we felt or saw so on and so forth. So it was very much a traditional input, process, output sort of planning and through the book and the research.
With the client research, how did you weave that into the stories? Was there a process that you guys did when you were putting it together?
Well, we would open up with, here's the thought, here's the perception, and then here's the validated research, i.e. from polls and conversations. Mm-hmm. Here's specific client stories or colleague stories.
Or ours.
Or our stories, absolutely. We're pretty transparent in there, very transparent, a little scary transparent at times, to be honest.
I love how that escalated.
Yeah, it's like, I forgot I put that in there. I'll have people come up to me and, I can't believe that I didn't know this about you. Even my mom, she's like, every time you write a book, I learn so much about you. I was like, wait, I put that in the book. I forgot the question.
I was talking about just the splicing of research in with story.
How we twisted
yeah.
it.
So it was a sandwich. So we opened up with the concept. Here is our thought. Here is the research or the validated thought. Here is the story. Here is the lesson. And then we closed every single chapter with a cleaning of the closet. So an activity to get the reader into what it is that we just discussed. And we even have a bonus journal where we took the cleaning of the closet and we plucked it out into another book to we really hope that people take it and actually do something with it, because as Courtney said, this isn't a power trip book that we're like, oh, look at us, we wrote a book, oh, look at us and the cute title and the cute chapters. We want to change the community. We want to change the perspective around the current generation, the past generation, and the future generation of women, period.
I love how you put that together, because I think for nonfiction and for what you guys are doing, I think having that teaching perspective after all the facts and the stories is really strong for getting people to take action on your chapter. Now talk about the focus group a little bit. How did you create your focus group, and what was that like putting the focus group together for vetting your book?
Well, and I don't know that it was a super formal focus group. It was more, we compiled a list of people that we respected their opinions, their expertise. They had different perspectives. They came from different generations, different industries. So we knew they would see things different ways that we may not see ourselves. And then it was more reaching out to them with, here's the lineup of chapters and a little snippet of what they're going to be on. Which one speaks to you, so that could be one that you're going to fully read, dive into, give us feedback on, maybe share your story that relates to it. So it wasn't necessarily a focus group that was structured that we communicated with. Well, we do communicate on a regular basis, but not in a very formal way.
Right. We didn't do an in-person, other words.
Gotcha.
And some people actually said, oh, yeah, and they immediately sort of typed up a couple of stories and said, is this what you're looking for? And then, but the majority of them, we literally got on the phone or in person and interviewed them. And then we pulled and we either weaved in several stories, or we literally did an entire chapter on them in particular. So,
Now, I think that's really cool, like just having the idea of having the focus group, because I think for authors, I mean, that creates buy-in. People are automatically become invested in your work because now they're a part of it.
And I was just going to say, from a learning, from me personally, from book 1 to book 2, is for anybody who is listening and thinking about the book process, I cannot stress enough as a top tip to absolutely involve others, because it helps you from a marketing perspective. It helps you from that validity perspective, and it gets people excited in talking. So it's not only, we entered into it with helping us validate and really have some meat to it, but then you get all these bonuses and it's kind of like, duh.
Right, and you're still learning. I mean, for this type of book, you're learning as you go some of this too. I mean, they're life lessons. So like we just said in the beginning of this, there's no finish line you really get to in life, hopefully. You're always learning.
So when people were giving feedback, was there some feedback you were like, wow, that's amazing, we didn't think of that? And was there some feedback you were like, nah, how about not?
I don't think we got any that we didn't want to include. And I think because of the type of book this was too, they may not have been in line with Shelley and I necessarily because we're very similar, but they brought something to the table and we knew that there are women that feel the way they feel or think the way they think, and you don't want to exclude them because this is for women of all different types, industries, generations, thought processes.
Yeah. If anything, it was how in the world do we get all of this in?
Right.
And we actually had to cut some of it because the book got enormous, and I was like, oh my gosh, we've got to cut this back. So yeah, like I said, we easily could do a version 2 right now because there was just so many stories, and as it was going on, we had more people reaching out to us wanting to give additional stories.
With the writing process, there's always something that makes you shrink back a little bit sometimes as you go through the process. What were some of yours?
You know, something I hear all the time, people say, oh, I should write a book, or I'd love to write a book on this. And I feel like the reason that I hear commonly that they don't is because it is intimidating. You don't know where to start or how to break it down. It seems like this just enormous undertaking. And where would you be able to begin? But my tip would be just to begin, because if you really are passionate about something, and you have a story or a purpose behind what you're doing, once it starts to flow, there's more in there and more that will come out and come together than what you expected. It's just taking that first step of, I'm just going to do it.
What's the one thing that nobody ever told you, especially you, Courtney? This is your first go round.
Yes.
What is the one thing that no one told you about being a writer?
Oh gosh, how much goes into it? I cannot imagine having written my first book all by myself. I mean, and I'm naturally just a collaborator. I love working with people, being around people. I fuel off of other people. So I would lean that way anyways, naturally. But even if I didn't, I just couldn't imagine. I mean, I know a lot of, like Shelley, for instance, wrote her first on her own. Major kudos, because I cannot imagine having gone through this process without having a partner in it. And it made it exciting. There were days where I didn't want to do it, where it was too much and I had too much on my plate, or, oh, not now. But on those days, it was her that was saying, oh, no, we're going to do it. We're going to keep going. And I'm sure she had days the same way, that I was sending her over what I was done with, and it was her turn. And so she felt, it was her turn to pick that up and keep going. So just like in a business or in any relationship, if you have a good partnership where you're both motivating each other.
Courtney and I are both overachievers, and where Courtney is highly collaborative, I'm highly individualistic, so on the other spectrum. So, I come across at times to my detriment as a know-it-all, and it's not that I'm a know-it-all or feel like I am, but I'm just such an individualistic introvert that I have a hard time asking for help and other people's perspectives. And for me, it's always really tuning in my listening ears. As I tell my kids, do you have your listening ears on, before waiting to speak? So I didn't know the value. I knew the value, but I didn't take advantage of the value of input from others. And then the whole learning curve of how in the world do you publish to begin with. I stepped into this because I was a behind-the-scenes supporter on one of the Wiley books from Dr. Chris Neck, out at Arizona State, that I met at Virginia Tech years ago. And he's a leadership and development in the business school and professor. And he was just a great supporter and tutelage. And because I worked behind the scenes of that, I initially wrote the book. Chris did my foreword, and then I started pitching it to the different publishers. Well, this was on the brink of, everybody self-publishing. So I started doing the research and said, I'm not going to wait the multiple years to get the book published. I'm just going to do this on my own. So I had learning curve after learning curve after learning curve that I just didn't know what the heck I was doing. But because of my individualistic approach, I was just going to get it done. So I could just go on and on about the things that I learned. And quite frankly, you would think that I had it down from doing this the first time, but I've gone through the learning curve again with this book as well.
So let's dive into the book a little bit. So it looks like the book's like, 4 sections: heart, brain, backbone, and brass. Why don't you take us for a walk through the book?
So again, we went through a few reiterations of the title and how to sort of break it up. And then all of a sudden, and maybe Courtney remembers and I don't, I know we were talking to Ron Jacobson, who did our foreword. We were talking to him about the title, and there was a twist in. Originally, we had that it was Brass Ovaries. We didn't have Own Yours.
Oh, Brass Ovaries, Earn Yours.
Earn Yours. And he was like, he pushed on us. And he said, why do you have earn? And it very quickly turned into, well, you already have them. Aren't you trying to get women to level up and own what you already have? And we were like, oh my, it was like a V8 moment, literally. And we were like, oh my God, you're so right. So that was part of the twist there. And then it was about how do we come across as women differently? And the bottom line is that we don't just bring our brain or just our heart, even though a lot of people think we just bring our heart. We don't. And our backbone. And then how do we do that with grace, balance, fortitude, influence, and results? And so then we realized that we should bring our brain, our heart, and our backbone simultaneously. And that's truly how we own what we already possess. And it's about drawing it out. So that's where we brought in the initial part with let's get inside of our heads, and then let's go down to the emotional perspective, and then let's talk about the stereotypes of like being a bitch. Should you be labeled as a bitch or not? Is that good? Is that bad? And then finally, not having regrets and learning. So that's how the sections were broken out. Yes.
Right, and that's where it comes in, that piece about bringing other people's perspectives in. Because sometimes when you're creating something, it's just like writing, you have someone read behind you before you print, because you may know what you're meaning in that, but they see it a different way because they're not the ones that created that or had that initial thought. So that was just an example of why that was so valuable to bring in other perspectives.
Let's talk about the kind of the marketing side of the book. So you guys, you're out, you're marketing the book. Tell us how you're doing that. How are you getting the books into the hands of readers?
Sure. Well, it started very grassroots. We were sharing what we were passionate about with this, not just book, but movement of setting women free from these fears and things that have held them back. So we started sharing just word of mouth through networking organizations, and really what made that a comfortable ask and a comfortable share and not so much selling was that we were really sharing something we were passionate about, and we were able to put that piece on it that was, what's your thoughts? What is your opinion on this? Does this resonate with you? So again, from the beginning, involving people. And then, a major key piece for this book was bringing the women that we interviewed in, because now it's not even just those women that are in this book that feel a part of it and invested in its success and getting it out there, but their networks. Because for each of them to be able to come into here, and these stories they shared aren't the interviews they would do on this podcast. These are stories that some of them had not shared publicly, of personal and professional failures, challenges, disasters, even traumas. So when they were sharing this, it was a breakthrough for them. We did interviews where women would become emotional, where they would, just feel afterwards such a sense of gratitude for having someone that coaxed and pushed them into opening up in that way. So when they know that they're part of this, they want to share amongst their own networks and say, hear my story, hear what I did, let it inspire you. So in that sense, it's very, like I said, grassroots. It's relationship based and word of mouth. Since we've obviously, with me being involved and done the digital stuff too, we have the social media presence, we created the website. One of the things, again, along the lines of getting people involved and engaged, on the website we developed a quiz where women could, or people, visitors could fill out a very short quiz to kind of get just a snippet of what they would get in the book, helping classify them or helping them see where they fall on that spectrum of, do you really own your brass? Do you kind of own your brass? Are you at the beginning of this? So that was already getting them involved. It was also a way for us to collect contact information. We set up a VIP list that people could subscribe to, so that they were the first to know when we, we're at different phases of publishing, printing, where we are on our book tour, specials that we were running. So that was a big piece. Anything I'm leaving out?
And we also had some videos, live sort of video snippets that we did. Cheryl Tan from Tan Media, who's an incredible interviewer and PR person, helped us put together some really nice videos that we have on our website, and we're continuing to do things with them as well to get that out. And then the approach that we're taking on the book tour, I don't believe is normal. It is different, and I don't, I proudly will say this, that Courtney and I don't do anything normal. We're not typical, and we do that intentionally, but also that's just how we are. So we didn't want to just say, hey, here we are, come get a book and get a signing. We're going to do a couple of those like that, but the reality is we are doing this with discussions, with roundtables, small groups, groups that are 10 to 25, up to the groups that, there's 100 or more, and having discussions. Some of them have included women who are in the book, and so they're up with us in the panel, and they're talking about what it was to participate in the book, and tell their stories, and maybe tell other snippets of their stories, as well as just Courtney and I talking about, like, questions that you're asking, and talking about the tips and the lessons and what to do. And I tell you, it continues to be emotional for Courtney and I as well, because we've had, during these discussions, women also start to cry. Some really perceivably tough women in power positions. And yeah, they're like, oh my God, I didn't know that other people felt this way, or, I've been doing XYZ in this, profession for years, and I too am lost. And this is giving me, new hope and new inspiration. So, and the first time it happened, I don't know about Courtney, but I was like, oh, holy cow. Wow, this is cool. And wow, I feel bad for her, but I'm also really excited. And so, it's interesting to see that, and it's a really powerful marketing tool that we just didn't expect.
Right.
So having these roundtable approaches, I think discussions from the book tour is another marketing differentiation as well. So we've also reached out to our existing clients and also our prospects that have organizations that have a lot of women. And oh, by the way, let's just clarify, this book, if you don't understand by now, is not a male bashing, women are superior by any means. It's about equalizing, but we have men coming to our talks as well, and they're learning another perspective. It would be the same as going to how in the world do we understand these millennials as a boomer or a Gen Xer? It's how do we understand women, and how do we continue to retain them and engage them in our workplace.
I mean, you guys are doing all the right things. How's your engagement?
Good. People are really engaged on social media. We really haven't done paid advertising on there. It's all organic. The VIP list had good response. I think it's not even what's done within those four walls, digital four walls, if you will. It's really what's happening on a larger scale, because there are other groups we're part of, and other just pages and other things like that there's buzz about the book and people sharing and talking about it, which is interesting. And I think a key too was, before we launched, we built up anticipation for the book for a long time, probably longer than we had wanted to originally. But
we had some hiccups on the release.
Yeah. But we had people, they knew about this book from the beginning, and even before its really inception, we started sharing early on what we were doing, what we were passionate about. So people were kind of following that journey, and we were sharing as much as we could along that journey. Even when we would do an interview, or we would do a video shoot, or we would, whatever it was, we had accomplished, half of the book, or we got to a certain point, we were giving updates so that people felt like they were part of it. They knew what was going on. So when we hit go, we already had people waiting.
The other thing from a marketing networking that, again, we did intentionally, but not intentionally, it wasn't like it was on the list, is we went to where these women reside. So you talked about the networking and the person to person and people who knew us. So 3 really pivotal groups for us locally. Michelle Pippin with B. Michelle Pippin, who is Women in WOW. We met Michelle. I met her a few years ago, and then Courtney and I went to one of her women's conferences in Dallas. And Michelle is an incredible coach herself. We met some additional incredible women. So that circle that Michelle has and the energy within the entrepreneurial world of her members is incredible and has been extremely supportive, number one. Number two, we talked about the Peninsula Women's Group. I mean, we cannot give enough love and shout out to every single member that we've ever met and known and have been involved in the book. And then also Katie Bevins with Modern Femme, another powerhouse group of women. So again, all sort of different walks from multi-level marketing groups to big powerhouse executive groups of women. So being integrated in a part of those groups has also been a huge marketing tool for us, but just a networking tool of women, different perspectives, different walks of life, has also been critical. You cannot, even though I am an introvert, you cannot live within your world and your shell, because then you become oblivious and irrelevant. And one of our sections in the book is about get in or get out. You have got to remain in the game.
Yeah, that's the thing with the writing life. You know, you're behind your desk, you're typing away, you're hoping that people are going to show up to buy your book, but people always forget about that networking component, like you guys talked about. I mean, you guys were just dropping name after name and group after group of all these different groups that you went to, and they were very targeted to what you do, which helps your book as well. But the fact that you guys are so integrated and so ingrained with physical networking, because I think in the digital age, we tend to forget how important it is to actually meet real people. We get caught up in our Facebook world of just liking and posting and sharing and thinking we know people, but then you guys are out actually getting to know people and sharing your movement with people and talking about your book. And because of that, it's really changed the entire platform for you. Great job on what you've done with just creating an audience, building a buzz, writing the book, collaborating together in the book, and then making it happen. So last question. How can our listeners reach you?
Yeah. Well, our website, brassovariesownyours.com. There's submission forms. There's links to our social media pages. There's contact information for both of us. And, we're pretty open books. We're very busy, but we love connecting with people just for the connection, both of us. So we encourage reaching out, asking questions, getting involved, sharing this, because it's not about selling a book or booking a speaking engagement. It's about getting this mission and this movement out further and further. So anyone that helps spread that is then a part of it.
Awesome. Ladies, thanks so much for your time today. I had a great time talking to you about really how to start a movement with a book.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We're very grateful.
Yeah. And best of luck and continue to promote your book.
Thank you.
Thank you.